everyone, and welcome to our weekly Eye on Africa seminar. It's a very special day today, partially because we're right in the middle of Africa Week at Michigan, here at Michigan State University, and we're celebrating our connections with the great continent of Africa, and they're programming and I'll make an announcement in a minute on what's happening today and tomorrow related to the Africa Week. But it's also very special because we have two of our advanced doctoral students who have been with us for a while, and they're going to be presenting on their research. Because we're still an hour and a half, what we're going to do is that we're going to, and because the presentations are somewhat different, we're going to treat them discreetly and not as part of the same, so that Angela is going to present first, and she'll be given, including her time plus questioning, 45 minutes, and we'll try to wrap her session up at 12:45, and then Idris will take over and have to the rest of our scheduled session until 1:30. All right, now before I introduce them and their topics, I wanted to point out again that this is Africa Week, and there are some very special events that are happening today and tomorrow related to Africa Week. This afternoon in this very room at 2:30, between 2:30 and, it doesn't have an ending time, but I think it's probably 2 hours. So probably at 4:30, there's going to be a session in this room that's sponsored by the African Female Students Empowerment Program, and it's going to feature a dialogue with the AU, the African Union's ambassador to the United States and to the UN. And she's arrived last night, and she's going to be here, and she's going to be in this room and dialoguing on issues related to gender and women in Africa. And so please come. You don't have to be a woman to come to this. Please come, and I've had the privilege of meeting her this morning, and she's a delightful and very articulate person, so please do come to that. Then this evening, upstairs, above us in room 303, the African Student Leadership Association is going to be reporting back. They go every year in the early spring to Washington, D.C. to be part of the Model African Union. And as has happened in the past number of years, MSU, the two teams from MSU representing Niger and Zimbabwe, won top prize so the students that were involved in this are going to be reporting back to us, and that's at 6 o'clock upstairs in room 303. Then tomorrow, all day at the Kellogg Center, the African Graduate Student Association is hosting their annual conference. Every year they have a day-long conference where African graduate students and Africanist graduate students, Americans graduate students who study Africa, will be presenting papers. And this is all day tomorrow, starting at 9 o'clock at the Kellogg Center. It doesn't have the room here, but I'm sure as we enter the Kellogg Center, they always have the schedule for the day, and the rooms will be listed there. And then finally, as the end of Africa Week tomorrow night, at McDonald Hall, at the lower level, there's going to be a Taste of Africa. Free African food for everybody that shows up. So, and it's wonderful. This is the third year that we're doing this, and it's all arranged by the African Student Union. And so that please come and be hungry. It's going to be wonderful food. And that's at 6 p.m. then tomorrow evening at McDonald Hall on the lower level. All right, having had the announcements, now let me turn to, and I think what I'll do is I'll introduce each of these presenters before they present, and so that we don't forget who Idris is if I introduce Angela. I don't think there will be much of a chance of that, but anyway. All right, our first presenter presenting on what we are missing, gender gaps and sustainable intensification of cropping systems, is Angela Manjichi, who is an advanced PhD student in in community sustainability. Her research interest is in sustainable intensification of cropping systems, adoption of technology, and gender dynamics. In Mozambique, she works as a lecturer at the Higher Polytech Institute in Manica, and she has been involved in research and development aimed to understand social and economic aspects of farmer-led irrigation, maize and legume farming systems, seed systems, and technology upscaling, and innovative ways of delivering agricultural information and technology to rural households. She's also involved in higher education administration, where she has contributed to curriculum development for technical and vocational agricultural colleges throughout Mozambique, and worked on development of training packets for agricultural extension services in Mozambique. Angela, we're delighted to have you with us today. We look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, John. And thank you, everyone, for being here and understand a bit of Mozambique. I try today, like women are in front of everything in Africa, and I try today to be a gentlewoman and make Idris present first. But for some reason he refused, and now I'm trying to understand what are missing, that men are refusing to be in front, but still taking credit for women's work. So anyway, Idris. So I am Angela, I'm from Mozambique. I'm an agronomist by training, and I'm working as a lecturer. But my previous experience, my grandmother is a farmer. So I grew up in farming, understanding about farm. My mother is a retired, and she decided to go back to farming. And I'm trying to teach my daughter to also enjoying farming, but she decided that she wants to be an astronomer. I don't know why. So just a bit of context. I come from Mozambique. I also say that we're in front of Madagascar, because most of people they don't know where is Mozambique. We are Portuguese speaking country. And we have a population of 80 million people. Most of them are living in rural areas, and they have agriculture as the main livelihoods. So from those who live from agriculture, the majority is women. So women are the ones in front of agricultural development, but still they're not accountable when you're trying to understand the agricultural indications and agricultural development in Mozambique. The smallholder farming is the main predominant sector. We have two main sectors: the private or commercial farming, and smallholder farming, that is farming that is mainly done by the households in rural Mozambique. But still, even though it's the main activity and contributes to 30% of the GDP in Mozambique, we still have a very low productivity levels. According to the World Bank, in Mozambique, only 2.6 to 4.7% of smallholder farmers use fertilizers. And if we try to understand the amount of fertilizer that is sold in Mozambique, and we include both smallholders and private sector, only 5% is really commercialized in Mozambique and is used in maize. Improved varieties, that are those that ensure like high productivity levels, are used by less than 6% of farmers in Mozambique. Therefore, we have a very low crop yield of productivity in Mozambique. So if you try to give brief facts, like smallholder farmers average production of 0.9 tons per hectare, and if you compare to the Southern Africa region, we find that other countries like Zambia and Tanzania, they have 3.0 to 3.5 tons per hectare. So this puts Mozambique at the bottom end in terms of productivity. Trying to address these issues, we developed with support of the Agriculture Center for Research in Australia, a project that aimed to intensify the production of maize and legumes in Southern and Eastern Africa. So we worked in 5 countries. It was Mozambique, Malawi, Tanzania, Kenya, and Ethiopia. And here I'm talking about the experience of Mozambique. So based on what we tried to do, this is my aunt farm, and I have my daughter there, try to engage in agriculture, is to move to this kind of custom system that is predominant in Mozambique, and try to have a more organized and using of organic farming or mulching, so they can improve the soil fertility, but also increase their productivity and support the use of agriculture inputs. So in this program, I was responsible for gender mainstreaming and also for technology upscaling. This is deliver the technology that we develop within the project and make sure that farmers in central Mozambique have knowledge, awareness, and they will adopt that technology. So in this project, we did 4 main activities with the farmers. We had the on-farm agronomics experiments where we look at the conservation agriculture, use of improved seeds, use of fertilizer, and also use of herbicides. We also tried to have, we did a program on plant breeding, so for each ecological zone, so for each of the districts that we are working, we develop with farmers the suitable maize and legumes varieties to those communities. So we also conduct socioeconomic studies to understand the factors that determine adoption of technology. We did value chain analysis because we understand if we want to increase adoption of technology, we will need to link to a market so farmers will get motivated and engaged. And we also did some capacity building both for farmers, rural extension agents, and technical research staff. In terms of our gender approach, this was a research and development project. We designed in 3 main stages. At the project design, we had gender mainstreaming as one of the cross-cutting aspects in all the components. So when you talk about agronomic experiments, plant breeding and socioeconomic studies, we always make sure that the researchers working in these 3 components will have the gender aspect as one of their project outcomes. At the project implementation, we trained the research staff in order they could have a gender responsive research, and we did community awareness meetings, and we tried to advocate for gender inclusion. And we also conduct develop indicators to assess gender. But what happened is we were not clear understand how we could integrate gender. So at the first stage, we are looking at gender just in terms of how many women and how many men are participating in the project, if they are adopting the technology. And using these indicators, we talk about if we have X percentage of women, then we are having equity and ratio that women are having access to the technology. And we tried all these stages to engage with policymakers and show them the importance of including gender, of developer sex disaggregated data, and how we could better improve the communication process. So what we found, the project started in 2010, and this year we are getting into the 3rd phase of the project. So when you look at the major technologies that we have developed, we find this valve where both male and female prefer the technology. We see that minimum tillage and residue retention is the least liked technology. So farmers decide they didn't like this and therefore they did not adopt, even though it is one of the major components of conservation agriculture and sustainable intensification. Why planting in a row and new maize varieties were the most liked technology? So when we look at this data, we find that these are the activities or technologies that require a lot of labor. So if you talk about minimum tillage, even though they do not, how can I say, prepare the soil, they still need to ensure that the soil is covered. So to cover the soil, they will need to look for the to plant residues, and sometimes the farm did not have plant residues. Either they have to buy plant residue to cover the soil, which did not make sense because we had something that was easily accessible. And in terms of residue retention, is some of the places they have the problems of termites. So the residue that they put in the soil was quickly consumed by the termites, so they will need to continue put the residues. So planting in a row, we understand that even though there is much more labor here, they still save in seed and they still save on their saving. So because they save in seed, they really like this technology. In terms of maize variety, is because new maize varieties have much higher production level, so they can sell or they can save for household consumption. When you look at why they decide to adopt, both male and female, they say that the technology that they decide to adopt, the yields increased. They found that it was very easy to use, but also reduced pest and disease. Therefore, they also see savings when they use the technology. But what is interesting is when you look at how does it save labor and if increase the access to market, women, they say, we don't like this technology. So we still see that even though we're trying to link farmers to market, women are still producing for household consumption rather than having a market perspective. So this is one of the points that we think we failed, because women are still engaged in household consumption in traditional roles, and they're not looking at these new varieties as something that can improve their livelihoods by increasing their income. And we also have saved labors. Most of men think that the technology saves labors, but among we have the 840 participants, only 5 women think that reduce labor. And when we try to understand is conservation agriculture usually is done after the land preparation. So when you look at the major activities in the farm, men are usually involved in land preparation and planting. And after that, until the harvesting, women are the ones who take care of the crop in the field. So by having mulching, land cover, this actually increases the amount of work that women will allocate to the farm. Therefore, they will not be satisfied with the technology. So in terms of gender roles and the way we try to understand is, within this project, we see that men are still in the activities that are looking towards higher income or increase the income at household. So in the farming, they look for land preparation. Once the land preparation is done, they're involved in other activities as livestock, which gives more money, but also employment. And then they go back to farming after harvesting so they can sell the money and control the income that is generated by, I have a pointer here, sorry. So, increase, so the men still have access to the income that they get from their crops. Women are most involved in household activities, and we believe that that's why they don't look at the market, because this activity is still dominated by men. They also involved in crop management. After the land preparation, woman is the one who take over the all other activities with the crop in the field. For instance, weeding is mainly done by women. In terms of access and control over the resource, we found that in all the regions that work, men still have access to the resource and they control the resource. When we say to control, for instance, the land belongs to the man, so he has access to the land. And the men can make decisions about how they're going to use the land. But when you come to women, the access varies according to the place. So access is, women always have access, but they cannot control how the land is going to be used. The same applies with the income that is generated by agricultural activities. So, for instance, the women is involved in maize production. They work all along until they're harvesting. But when they go to the market, when they get the money, the man is the one that makes decision about how they're going to use the money. In terms of technology, men prefer the high yield varieties. With high yield, they can get more money. interestingly, the women, they're not looking at high heels, but they're looking for early maturity variety. So we have maize that can give, it's what? Like they can give the maize after 3 months. We call this early maturity variety. So they give maize much earlier, but they're not high yield variety. And we think that this happens because women are more concerned with how they're going to feed their family. So the shorter time to have access to the food, so this is the variety that they will prefer. Men also prefer fertilizer and crop rotation. Women, they do not talk about fertilizer at all, but they talk about crop rotation and intercropping. And it was very interesting that they say that with intercropping, they can get both maize, but also legumes. So at the same time, they can ensure that they have a starch food, but also they can have, what is the word in English? Stew. They can have a stew to complement the starch. And when they get the money, where they will decide to invest. So here we find that men say they will invest in children education. This is not very common because in the past literature, most of the literature indicate that men, they don't look at household needs, but they're looking more to the markets and how they can generate more money. But in this case, both men and women, they say that when you get the money, we'll invest first in children education. Men decide to get seed and fertilizer, so this is a way to continue to have high yield production. But women, they will prefer to invest in household goods. For instance, blankets, clothes, any other things that will improve their condition of their family. This is where they go. Men will buy construction material to improve their house, and women will look at food. And seed comes as the last reason where, or the last resource where they would invest. So when you look at this, and because you're trying to introduce a change in the community, we find that was very interesting that even though they have access to better varieties, they have access to better inputs, women are still in the traditional roles of what we common understand. And actually, this is the reason why I'm here. So is to try to understand, this is one of the focuses of my research, is to try to understand where are we missing. So in this case, for instance, the women prefer like early maturity varieties, but when you go to the input agro dealers, they are not selling those varieties that are preferred by women. They still target the varieties that men prefer because they believe they will get better income. So this is my research. I think this is going to be the focus. I'm going to be happy to answer from you, but also to get some feedback and try to understand why are we missing. So, because even though I give opportunity to men to be in front, they still refuse. So, obrigada. I'm trying to teach a Portuguese word every day for someone that talks to me. So this is thank you in Portuguese.
Thank you very much, Angela. Okay, before we go on to our second presentation, we're going to take some time for response and questions, comments. She's asked us for some comments. We don't need this mic for amplification, but we do need this mic for the live streaming, and we are live streaming this and recording it. So Shingi's going to take the mic around. If you have a comment, a question, a suggestion, please, now is your chance.
That's great. As a teacher, we say if student doesn't have a question, either we did extremely well or we did extremely poor or badly. So I'm trying to understand in which extreme I am.
The first one.
The first one?
Oh, is there somebody? Oh, sorry.
So, I don't know, it's working?
It's working.
Oh, for recording.
Recording,
okay.
yes, not for
All right, so you said women demand improved certain varieties, right? But then the suppliers don't supply those. So what are the power dynamics like in the household? Like who has the bargaining power? Because then the person with management decisions on the land becomes important, right? And I think that's what you want to target.
So actually, because we want to introduce change, we are not targeting those who control the resource, but we are trying to change these power dynamics. So the agro dealers are still targeting those that they believe they will control the resource. So if I talk about my experience working in Mozambique, sometimes you find very funny. Once I was doing a work in rice system, and we're trying to understand in terms of control and things like that. And we had women that they say, when you do harvesting, we don't bring all the bags of rice to the house. So we sell some of the bags and we keep the money, and the rest they take to the place. And the men, when they see the bags, they sell those bags that are there. So the women, they do understand that having control of the resource is very important. But because I think the cultural issue still says that man is the one who has to be in control. I think this is one of the points that are missing. We are only looking at the technology. We're not looking at the social dynamics, social interaction that's happening in the community, but also at the household level. And we never managed to convince the agro dealers to also targeting the varieties that are preferred by women, because they feel that they don't have a market there.
So I think, from a very realistic standpoint, targeting the agro dealers would be a hard thing because the demand has to be there for them to bring it. And so in this case, as you're rightly saying, like targeting the social dynamics becomes important. I think there will be mechanisms that you can use to induce women to have, control. Like there have been experiments in places, whether it's access to credit or just anything that nudges women to have, more control. And once that is done and the demand is there, agro suppliers will be able to do that. But going from the other way, from the agro suppliers end, might be, a little hard. I'm not being, how do they say, pessimistic.
So this is the mindset that we want to change, because actually the women are the one who have the money, and you find women that because they don't find the market, they're still doing their own seeds, and they say if we have a place where we can buy the seeds, then we can buy. And we have communities where women say, oh, if you help us to create a community seed enterprise, we'll make sure that we as a women can organize and buy the seed. But it's still always the mindset that women don't have control, the power.
So that's, that's what you
So I thought like that before, and we designed this project. It was amazing with very beautiful indicators, but we always had this perception that if you have technology there, everything is going to work. But in terms of gender mainstreaming, I believe we did not address well since the beginning. Like 8 or 90% of the research were all male. The technology development, even though we addressed for participatory research, like the voice of women were never heard. So in terms of extension service, like majority were all men. So this creates a kind of a systemic problem in addressing gender issues, and we never addressed that. So we're most focused on economics, and or either economics, plant breeding, or agronomic practice. But even though we say that there is a cross-cutting gender in the project, we really never had a cross-cutting. We had a more silo gender perspective. So I think this is one of the points that we failed. So my question is, everyone, like we are talking about, like I went into university a few years ago, like when I did my undergrads, it is quite a few years ago, and the same problems that we talked at that time, we are still talking today. We talk about gender roles, we talk about control, we talk about women's position, but it's still the same. And I say, what is wrong? What we are not doing well? So this is one of the things that hopefully at the end of my PhD I can understand.
I have a quick question. Thank you very much for your presentation. One of the difficulties that generally change agents or people who want to implement change have is if the change is really relevant to the people they want the change for, meaning that do the people want the change? That's one thing that is also, I think we need to take into consideration. One thing I got from your presentation is there is a technology that is being introduced, and that technology is kind of increasing the workload of women in terms of how the work was distributed. Like men would be doing, for example, preparing, and then will come back for harvesting, and in between, women will do the job. And if I'm not mistaken, one of the technology is increasing the workload, and that is why women are resisting. And another aspect I'm getting from your presentation is women tend to be more driven by, food self-sufficiency, if I'm not, I think I'm using the word, the English word, autosuffisance. So now, is the change driving women out of that perspective, taking them, for example, because the first, objective is to have enough food for their family. So the new technology, the change that you're bringing, is it taking them from that because you want them now to cultivate and to sell instead of to cultivate and feed the people? Is that one of the aspects why they are kind of resisting this change? Thank you.
First, when you ask if those people really need that change, or if they, I don't know, but I think is, are we imposing a change, or the community really needs the change? Like, my grandmother is a farmer, and she raised, I had 11 uncles and aunts. And with farming, she managed to raise 11 uncles and aunts. And I grew up looking at the struggle that my grandmother had to have access to, for instance, to credits. And I met with women. I don't think any woman likes to be in the position that she struggles to make meets end just because she's a woman. So when she produced sufficient to ensure that the household will have food, then she can still sell and save, but the man is the one who controls the income that comes from selling, I don't think women really like. And I know that most of people will tell, oh, this is culture, this is African culture. And other day someone was telling me and told me, Angela, please bring me your culture statement and show me where it says that women cannot control the resource. So I say, okay, this is what I've heard all my life. Say, no, this is, it's not about culture, but it's the perception or the idea men have in how the community should behave. No one ever asked the women if this is the culture they want to. And culture is dynamic, culture change. And why we still keep the bad aspects of our culture, but forgetting all other good aspects of other people's culture. Sorry, we're keeping the bad aspect, I believe, and I'm sorry if I hurting some feelings, but I believe that we're keeping the bad aspect of our culture and reinforce those that put women in a very low condition and position, and they're trying to keep straying the ones that I don't think are relevant. So if any one of you can tell me in their culture statement this, like women should have access but not control over the resource, then I think I will address different my research. The second point is in terms of...
Can I just clarify a little bit in that thing? Is, my question is more directed into how to make the people recognize the need for change. Like, for example, you show them and they say that this is change and we need change, and they initiate the change. So that way they will own it and they will be more committed to that change. Most of the time what happens is people come and say, you are living in these conditions and these are not really the conditions you should be living in, you need change. So how can you make them own it, see it by themselves, and then even initiate it? Because that way, I think is more kind of efficient. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying it has to be with culture or something else.
Okay.
Yes.
For instance, for us, we have the, we have the participatory approach. And sometimes it's very difficult because when you submit a proposal, it's between the research institution and the donors. But when you got the fund, we work with the entire community. We had like community meetings, like starting of a campaign and at the end of the campaign. The first thing is what are the problems that you have? How can you work together? What kind of issues we can address in this community? And the technology that we have, when I talked about breeding, was participatory plant breeding. And we have this approach that we call mother and baby trials. So the farmers work with the researcher where they identify the varieties that they like, they identify the traits that they like, and the researcher has the obligation of addressing those community needs. Where we did fail, and I think this is where participatory approach can be kind of tricky, is we are looking at, we did like gender awareness work with women and men, but at the moment of decide which technology we should uptake, for instance, we start with crop rotation, we start with job stick, we start with a lot of technology in the first year. The second year we reduce them because the community said, this we don't need, so let's focus on this one. We also established what we call innovation platforms. So this is a forum where we had farmers, we had researchers, we have extension service, we have local authorities, and they will discuss the project results and see which way the project will take. So this is the way we work throughout the project, and we are now trying to understand, even though we had all these participatory methods, we try to engage the community through the community meeting awareness, community technology evaluation, innovation platforms, why women are still not accounted in this project. In terms, if I tell you, in terms of indicators, we have more than 50% of women in the project. But in terms of if women really took the technology, this is where we have problems. And we did not address the social issues. So I think this also answers your second question about technology. Is I think in some way in between, even though we're doing participatory research, in some way we did not listen to the women's voice. Otherwise we'll have like both early and high yield varieties in the markets.
We have quick, please be quick because we do need to have our second one, so we have two quick comments.
Were the women at the community meetings?
Mm-hmm.
They were?
Yes, they were.
Did they speak up?
I will show one example that I found very funny. So, I don't know. We had this meeting, and women and men were there, and we did the participatory mapping, we did the ranking of technology, and the men were the ones who were contributing, and women, when she wanted to speak, she would touch the man and say, this is it.
Okay.
So we are working there and we observe these things, and the following meeting we say, oh, let's split up. We're going to have women in one place and men in another place. And we did the same exercise and we come up with very different results. Very, very different results. And we try to address that throughout the project. And most of the meetings will have like different meetings for men and women. And we'll have a general meeting where we'll say, well, these are the results that we had. How should we proceed? And sometimes the men would agree with what women discuss and say, oh, we never talk about that, so we should include that. But then is also in terms of who is facilitating this project. So we are working in Mozambique. We had the initial 6 community, and then we expand to 14 and 10 to 36. And we try to build the local capacity to try to address these issues of gender dynamics and gender sex disaggregate data. But it's still very hard to influence the household relations.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm the African Union Ambassador to the United States. My name is Arcana Chumbara-Coral. Thank you. I just thought I might shed some light to your question. Your question is very valid, and I think this issue needs to be elevated to the top policy levels. At the African Union, we realize the importance that the majority of the people in the world, which are women, our representation at every level is insignificant. So we have elevated this issue where we are saying gender parity by 2025. At every level, leadership must be a minimum of 50% women. So we have countries that have actually taken leadership on this. Ethiopia is sitting at a parliament with 60% women. Rwanda. Rwanda, that's why Rwanda is so progressive. Because when an issue is brought to parliament, the women are springing into action. The women of Rwanda found out that if we just clean our streets, pick up the trash, we could cut the healthcare budget in half. Because that mosquito that was breeding in a can of soda no longer has a home. And we can eradicate malaria. And the Rwandese women said, that's all we gotta do. So they went to work. And now in Rwanda, there is a mandatory inspection of communities by the government. The president himself is on the streets, cleaning the streets. It is now the cleanest country in the world, Rwanda. You all didn't know that. You cannot take plastic into Rwanda. At the airport, if you're carrying plastic, you're not boarding that flight into Kigali. This is what women do. But if that issue had been tabled to a parliament of men, I can assure you it would not have passed. But not only that, when the little girls grow up seeing on television a woman prime minister, a woman president, right now Ethiopia appointed its first female president. Hallelujah. Amen. Ethiopia followed suit. Now we have 50% female cabinet. Zimbabwe has a female defense minister. Ethiopia has a female defense minister. So when little girls grow up seeing a defense minister commanding a battalion of men, a woman, now that's how we bring change at a subliminal level. You cannot tell that girl to shut up. Yes. Because she sees her role models around her every day. Yes. And so we must look at it from the top all the way down. At the African Union, we're doing our part, and we need everybody, particularly those of us in leadership roles, and all of you in your roles. As a woman, your behavior is communicating to these men. So what kind of message are you giving them? Are you going to allow them to continue to get away with what they have been getting away with all along? No. The answer is no. So let's take ownership. Yes. Let's let these men know that we know your game and we got this. Yes. We are done with you.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. Okay, it's time for us to very good way to segue into our next presentation. Thank you very much, Angela. Let's give her a hand again.
Idris, I know your game.
You are already our president, the president of African Graduate Student on campus. So you're already taking that have charged already, so I'm not playing no game.
All right, thank you very much. Our second presenter today, another wonderful advanced doctoral student here at Michigan State University, is Idris Abubakar. And Idris is a doctoral candidate in the K-12 and Education Administration and Leadership Program. His dissertation examines participation and experiences of rural migrant Muslim Hausa girls in a residential Quranic school in Sokoto, northwestern Nigeria. His dissertation research has been funded by Michigan State University College of Education Summer Research Development Award and the Gender, Justice, and Environmental Change Fellowship from the Center for Gender and Global Context. And also, it's not on here, but Idris came to us, when was it the first time, Idris, as a FLA?
2010.
2010. 2010. So Idris has been around for a while, and so he's part of our community. And as you see, he has his HAIL, the Higher and Adult Education Program supporters, his cheering section here. Okay, Idris, thank you. Oh, his presentation is rural migrant. Oh, I read that. Okay, sorry. I thought I hadn't.
Well, I don't know how to start or where to start, because Angela and all the speakers that give different comments and perspectives, I think, has made me, I think, even more committed to the work that I have started and the work that I'm about to highlight. And I want to highlight the summary of my dissertation work that I have been working on for the past 3 years. And hopefully I will be defending this work around maybe May or sometimes in the summer. But the work has been completed, and it's a great opportunity to share the findings of this work before even my committee see it formally, with the exception of my own research director. So Angela's presentation also, if you look at the title of my presentation, has touched about environmental change. And it's not coincident, I think our presentations are matched together, because I conducted this study in a really rural community in northern Nigeria. And I think agriculture and rural livelihood, I think, is very important to this community. But at the same time, they are also in quest for education for their daughters in particular, who are also important agents in the Hausa culture and in Muslim culture in northern Nigeria. And that caused some environmental changes within the household, in the community, and also in the region. I want to move very fast. I want to give more time and room for questions, because I'm a stranger in this gender work. My research does not only address gender, but it addresses educational policies in terms of access for education for disadvantaged families and children in northern Nigeria. But I'm particularly for this dissertation interested in highlighting experiences of rural families and their daughters in their quest for education. So if I move very fast, I am doing that intentionally so that I can leave room for questions and comments. So just a brief outline of the presentation. I want to start by showing you what setting this research was carried out, and also the background of the study, and how I frame the study from reviewing and going back to see what has been done in terms of this area. Of course, from education, I cannot conduct this research without grounding it in a framework that can help me to examine these issues very, I will say, systematically and professionally. Of course, the methodology of the study, and I'm also going to share with you the synopsis of the findings and the implications that I think the study may have in terms of this location where the research was conducted. And of course, I want to hear your own comments and questions and suggestions as I move forward in this direction. So as I said, the research was conducted in Nigeria. I think everybody in this room knows Nigeria. Nigeria is not a stranger to the world, also to the continent. Nigeria has about 200 million people, per the, I think, popular statistics, but official statistics is still at 180 million people, because the last statistic was conducted in 2006, and they are still strategizing because of the complicated political situation to have a kind of census which is yet to be conducted. And this research, as I said, was conducted in Sokoto. Sokoto is in northwestern Nigeria, and it shared a very close boundary with Niger Republic. When I was going to these villages conducting interviews, they would tell me, did you see that house? That is Niger. So you don't have to go to Niger through any means. You can just stand, and just see what is happening in Niger. And just for another context, I was born here in the city of Zaria in Kaduna State. It's also in the northwest. But I chose Sokoto for many reasons, because Sokoto holds a very important traditional and political power in northern Nigeria. The Sultan of Sokoto, the Sultan of Sokoto, who is, I think, the leader of the Islamic community in northern Nigeria, and some people think even the entire West Africa, because of the resources and also the territory that he governs in terms of his Islamic leadership and traditional leadership. And this is the entrance gate to his palace in Sokoto, and it has about 3 to 4 gates, because he has his own gate that he's the only one who passes through that gate. But this is the gate that everybody can walk in if you have to do anything in the palace. And the school that I'm looking at is this Islamic Quranic schools, which I think by rough statistics, nobody have any official statistics, but there are more than 50,000 in northern Nigeria. Because if you think in every Muslim community there is a mosque, so there is this school attached to that mosque or close to the mosque. So they outweigh the formal schools in northern Nigeria, but they are mostly found in the Muslim communities, and the Muslim communities are highly populated, and they are more than the Christian communities in northern Nigeria. And this is just one of a photo of how important this school is to the northern Nigeria Muslim community. And this is a ceremony of graduation from the Quranic school. As you can see from the photos, the schools are mainly for boys. Girls are never attending these schools the way the boys do, because they are needed in the households. And I want to just make clarification. It's not because they are not attending, but they go to the schools and come back because they are needed to come and help in the house or on the farms, depending on your location. But boys can be free to go and do the studies, and they are not needed as much as the girls are needed at home. So they have more time to engage with the school. So this is my research team in the rural area where I conducted this study. And if you look to the extreme end, this is me dressing differently. I have to look like my people because I went back to my people. And then this is the proprietor of the school, and he's the one who took me to the communities where the kids came to study with him, because these kids migrated from these rural areas to come and live with him and study with him, and the time duration for their residency can last from 2 to 3 years. So he took me after we finished on the school side in Sokoto to those rural communities where the girls come to study with him. And this is our driver. And he was very kind, generous. We really have to overcome so many obstacles, but his skills, make us safe. And we went in and spent our time and come back safe. And this is one of my research assistants. She also did a very wonderful job, and I cannot do this work without all of them, but I think I give more credit to her, because for Islamic and Hausa culture, I cannot get access to the girls to speak to them directly. And the same thing, I cannot go into the house to go and talk to the mothers. So she really played a very critical role in this research, speaking of women's voice. So whatever I say in this research, I'm reporting what women said, not what Idris is saying. I'm just a reporter. And this is my very good friend, as Dr. Mesla says. I came to MSU as a Fulbright scholar in 2010, and I continue to pursue my graduate studies up till now that I'm about to graduate. And he was also a Fulbright colleague. And that's how I got the link to go to Sokoto and do this research. And this is the community, and this is how much reception I receive or we receive, because we spend quite a long time with the community members. And this is a farewell picture when we are about to leave the field, sometimes in January 2018, when I left the field. And you can see this is the chief imam. This is the community leader. They call him Ubankasa. It means the father of the land in that community. And these are all people who have children, especially daughters, in Sokoto and all of that. So this is a setting, as I said, it is a very complicated setting. And before I started the research, Dr. Achebe is not here, but I will give her credit as well. I told her all my fears as a man. I said, I'm afraid. How should I go and be talking to women? I know the culture. I cannot go and talk to women. And she continued to guide me and give me important ideas and guidance. And here I am today talking about it. And as I said, I'm presenting the voices of these parents, especially mothers, and their daughters, what their experiences are in terms of this quest for education, but specifically the religious education, and also what impact that has to their environment, but even starting with their household, because it's really impacting them like seriously. Let me just go back quickly. Aisha, again, I will still give her credit. I never mentioned her name. I'm mentioning her name for the first time. She is the one doing the heavy work, and I have to give her the credit at any point I see her photo or I remember this research, which I cannot like go to bed and wake up without remembering and thanking her. So just a quick background, as I said, the kids migrate from these rural areas to go to Sokoto to study. And the term that these kids are being like referred to in northern Nigerian context originated from Arabic word called al-Majiri. And al-Majiri means many things to many people, but the genealogy of the concept is from Arabic word, which means migration in search of knowledge. And this happened in centuries back during the life of Prophet Muhammad. So because of the migration for the propagation of the religion, that is how the word originated. But in northern Nigeria and in many similar contexts, they are seen as street kids. Because some people think they are just kids who parents don't like, or they have nobody and they are roaming around the street to fend for themselves. And the residential Quranic Al-Majri school, as I said, is just an informal Quranic school. It's not owned by the government. It has a proprietor because the house of the proprietor serves as the school and the residence for the students to live, who came from many villages. And the central curriculum is the Quran. So they learn to memorize the Quran from the beginning to the end, which many of us, regardless of your social status in northern Nigeria, is the first school that you have to go. And I went to the school, but I never a resident student because the school is not far from my house. So I have the privilege of going to the school and come back to my home, eat and sleep to my parents. But these kids don't have that luxury. Again, it's outside any control of Nigerian like educational system from the state to the local level. So they are operating independently of the government, but they have like a kind of oversight by the community where the school is located. Because the proprietor is not only a religious leader, is also a community leader. So there is sort of a community oversight. And as I said, traditionally, girls were never included as residential students, but they are included when the school is located within a walking distance because of how important they are to their households. Again, according to the statistics, we don't have official statistics, but I think as of 2015, UNICEF reported about 10.5 million kids, like Al-Majris, to be in northern Nigeria. And the statistics went on to say 69% of these kids are located in the north. And out of this 69%, majority of them are girls because of the history and the tradition of how girls are needed in their households in order to fend for their families or help their families to perform some household activities. And as I said, they are considered to be out of schools because these kids are not in Nigerian government schools, even where the schools are located within their own households. So they are not considered to be in school because they are attending the Quranic and Majri schools because it's not considered to be a school in the Nigerian formal structure. And for these reasons, these families opted for these schools. And of course, as I said, they seem to be either street kids or people who have no future or ambition. And these families, I think from what I have learned from the years I have been engaging with the literature, one of the reasons or decisions that they are making for this choice is because the formal schools are really out of reach for these poor people. And the reason being is there are fees associated to the formal schools. Even though with the 1999-2000 global movement for universal education, where I think we want to achieve, 100% literacy at the basic primary and secondary school level, these families can still not afford some fees charged by these formal schools. And of course, because of the legacies of either colonial systems or formal school system, uniforms, sandals, a lot of things, and especially for girls who even need more than boys need in terms of the preparation and readiness to go to school. So from the literature, this is one of the things that I think I came up like consistently, not only in Nigeria, but across the African continent. Poor families are unable to engage or access formal education because of the fees. And to some people, these fees are very simple or small, but these families, these are big deals. Because in northern Nigeria, people tend to have more than one kid. So if you have to enroll 5 kids and you have to buy 5 uniforms, 5 sandals, that would be a very big deal. And because of all this cost, these families find these Quranic al-Majri schools to be an alternative. And of course, religious, interest is there, but it's just a way for them to really educate their kids because this is out of reach. And why this is very accessible is because the concept of the religion made it very easy because there is no formal fee associated with it. So you contribute what you can contribute, and if you cannot contribute, God will help you, you are welcome. But nobody will turn you away like in the formal school where you have, maybe you have put on you, but the uniform is not a school uniform. So you get sent back home. Your mom have not harvested her corn or millet, she hasn't paid, you go back home. You don't have a kind of maybe some specialized books that is needed, you go back home. But in this school, whether you have the Quran, you don't have the Quran, you are welcome. You can even share the Quran with people. So that's how generous it is. And the people find it to be very, easy for them to access the education in this religious context. And for this reason, I think this population, which from the statistics we have seen about 10 million people are missing out of educational opportunities in northern Nigeria, particularly I think at the primary and secondary school level. Because most of these kids are between the ages of 12 to 14 to 16, but the earliest I have encountered is 12 years old in my own field work. And recently I discovered in Sokoto, because of the history, and Sokoto being the center of Islamic learning and traditional institutional administration in northern Nigeria, which the two go together, have started to receive kids from rural communities around Sokoto, and some of them even beyond Sokoto from the River Niger area, but I wasn't able to reach those areas. I limited my research because of the time and the resources to Sokoto. But they came from far distances to come and study in these houses, and I'm very interested how the parents, from my own understanding of the culture growing up in northern Nigeria and schooling, how will parents, especially in rural settings, let their daughters go far away for 2-3 years? This is really like something that I need to know what is happening, but not only me. I think the Nigerian people and the educational, authorities and the global community need to know, so that if there is anything that can be done to connect these people to the, educational opportunities that every kid is expected to receive, at least at the basic education level, can happen. Then I said, okay, let's see what is happening in their daily experiences. And is it a very positive experience, or do they have some challenges as they do this? So I went with this in mind, and I also want to see, as I said, what are the trade-offs, because I know the importance. I grew up in a family of 21 children, and I have 7 sisters. And my sisters, sincerely speaking, we go to the same school, but they come back home, they have more expectation than I do. Yeah, so I want to see this family is not only the household activity, but this is a rural environment where agriculture is very important. If for nothing, for food security. They don't have to buy food, even if they are not doing the agriculture for money, but they need to feed themselves. So I also want to see how this education is happening and how can we support them in football school setting in order to draw attention of policymakers from what we're going to learn from their experiences and challenges to make this possible. And of course, I drew 4 research questions. The first research question is, the leading research question, I want to see how decisions are made within the household. And since it has to do with daughters, I'm very sure there are some kind of maybe back and forth between the husband and wife or between the families. So I want to see among these actors, who is making the decision, why is he making the decision? Is this decision shaping people's life, people who are left behind, people who have gone to the urban areas to adopt into this school setting, to also grow up to be maybe women or mothers, whatever is expected of them within the families. And also I want to see how are these people running this program? Because as I said, boys are usually the people who are supposed to be in this school, but girls are not added. So, and I think, as I said, the study is just looking to address the issues of educational access and retention of girls in Nigeria, looking at the current educational policies and what we can learn here in order to revisit these policies to make education accessible to these families. And I want to see how we can do this based on research perspectives, not on assumptions, because these problems have been looked from different perspectives within and outside Nigeria. People have looked at it as, oh, this is child abuse, this is a social work issue. People are looking at it, oh, these are abandoned kids, they don't have anybody. People have looked at it, oh, these are just beggars because everybody is poor, so they are on the street. So I want to see from my experience and then the research, what are these people going to say so that I can report it? So I'm not going to hold my own personal opinion alone. Again, I study the past studies and I look at the history because of the Nigerian history engaging with colonialism and the native Nigerian administration, and also the larger literature on Quranic school education in northern Nigeria, girls' education, and I built my study within all of these contexts so that I shouldn't just look at Quranic school, but I look at different angles so that I can be able to have a well-informed study. Of course, I engage two theories to look at it, and the first one is feminist theory, and as we all know, we heard from Angela and many speakers, we want to see as how gender-based issues are happening within the household, which in turn affects issues that are happening within the society or the larger community. And also I engage the post-colonial theory to see what had happened and what may we learn from that legacy that is informing what is happening now. And it is a qualitative study and a case study because, as I said, there are tons and thousands of these schools in northern Nigeria. I cannot go around because of the time and the resources at my disposal. So I constrained the study to a very manageable chunk. And the setting is Sokoto, and I said in Sokoto, I just chose the school that have these girls and has sufficient amount of girls that came from those villages. And the participants, as I said, they are between 14 to 16 years. And the selection of the participants is, as you see on the screen, I selected 10 of them because I want to have a rich and engaged conversation, even though my study engaged 3 methods of data collection, which I'm going to come to. We did interviews, we did participant observation. I also collected documents in the archives. So I sampled 10 girls, matched them with their parents, teachers, the school proprietor, and community leaders, as well as religious leaders. Of course, these people, nobody was compelled to do or to participate. Everybody agreed to participate in the study very willingly. As I said, interviews were conducted, and I conducted extensive amount of interviews. But for this study, I just chose 10, and I will continue to use the interviews as I continue to work on this area. Of course, during the field work, I kept an extensive note and reflection because it was a thought-provoking experience, speaking to people and hearing their experiences, the challenges. So these are the methods I use to collect my data and the data that I garnered from this study. Positionality, I think we talked about it. As a man, before going into this study, I was really scared. But I think now I'm very confident because I'm reporting what women in particular said about men. And being a man, I have made sure that a Muslim and of course a student at a US institution I became an insider and outsider. And those issues, I confront them on a daily basis as I go to talk to people about this issue. And up till today, I'm reflecting on these issues. But to just make sure there are some kind of reliability and trustworthiness, I adopted triangulation and member checking, and also use some professional translators to make sure what the people are saying, I'm reporting exactly what they are saying, not my opinion because I'm coming from Michigan State or because I'm a Muslim man or male, so I'm saying what the people are saying. At the end of it, I returned to MSU. I come and had an extensive amount of data, and in the work, I replaced all the names of the people, gave them a fake name because that is one of the things we need to do to keep things confidential so that the people shouldn't receive any backlash as a result of what they share with me from their experiences or challenges or what factors are informing their decisions. I conducted 2 separate transcriptions from the audio to text. Of course, I use Hausa to do the interviews, and I transcribe everything into English with the assistance of professional transcribers. To start the data analysis, I adopted deductive open coding because of my research questions and theoretical framework, looking at some important concepts and statements and points that the people make that can help me to answer my research questions that I go into the field with. And I use that to analyze and interpret, the data from the content of the data. So these are the common themes that came out of my findings, and I think I have about 30-35 pages of explaining this using all the data sources I garnered, but because of time, I'm not able to put details. But the first thing I see, as I said, is a decision that people are making, and this decision, there are different actors, within the household, within the community, in the school, of course. So I see a lot of trust coming up all over the interviews and also the participant observation, especially when 12-year-old or 13-year-old or 14-year-old will be sent to that far distance for that residency period. So they trust the school is capable to perform or to deliver what they expect the school to deliver, which is religious instruction. But also the well-being of their kids is also assured because of that trust. And they trust the school because the school is not only an isolated institution, the school is part of a community. So the community is actively engaged with what is happening in the school and providing support at different levels and in different ways. And of course, I said the school is very affordable because there is no fixed school fees, there is no uniform, there is no any serious cost, no matter how many kids you wish to enroll from wherever you are in the region. Of course, gender roles. I think one important thing I want to highlight here for what we have had, gender roles in this context and in the, I think, sense of decision making. I think the school is a perfect setting for these parents to raise a female who is going to be like her mother, to fit into the culture of the gender role expected in the household and also in the community. But one thing that also came up that I think is very interesting is in order to do this, the kids are freed from what they are expected to do in their household and also helping on the farms. So before this decision is being made, some reshaping of the existing gender role happens. That's why these kids are being free to go and spend 2-3 years, which I think is very amazing. And at the same time, this is to entrench another gender role that the stakeholders who mostly are the men, because acquiring religious education is very important to every Muslim. And I think in Hausa culture it's even more important because a woman, she's expected to be a mother because marriage is an expectation upon each and every person who attains the age of marriage. So she's a mother, she's going to be transferring the same skills and also the same traditional gender roles into her kids and all of that. But as I said, the main takeaway here is an existing gender role within the household is being disrupted in order to achieve another gender role or entrenchment of another gender role. So as I said, these are just to highlight the major themes, and I'm more than happy to engage with you during the comments or questioning session or in the future if you want to talk more about this. And I think, as I said, I have a goal to see how this research is going to inform educators within Nigeria and outside Nigeria. And I think the first thing is policy. how are the current policies serving as kind of preventive factors for these families to access formal education so that they can also be part of Nigerian development, as we heard from our representative of the African Union, so that they can be the leaders commanding the battalion of men within the community or within the country. And of course, school leadership, as I said, the proprietor of the school is not just leading the school, he's leading a community. And that's why he's able to bring the community in different forms and ways to support the school, to receive kids from far distance that can be entrusted in them for years. I think there is an important knowledge for the school administrators in Nigeria, and also similar context to learn how to galvanize and harness the resources of the community so that they can have a kind of robust network of support to support kids and their families to have education. And also, as I said, from either gender perspective or educational policy perspective, this is a new direction of research that, from my experience, have not been explored so much and need to be explored for more understanding and deeper understanding. Just quickly, I want to conclude that this shift that is happening among these families, my research suggests that fathers are the main decision makers, and their desire to send their daughters to these schools is to entrench traditional gender roles grounded in the principle of Hausa culture and Islamic culture. Because in Hausa culture, a woman is supposed to be the leader of her own household. Maybe not in decision making, but in raising her own kids. And they believe once the mother is well educated, both in terms of Hausa culture and Islamic culture, when the two cannot be separated, she is well positioned to deliver that moving forward as a wife and as a mother. And to fulfill this desire, as I said, they need to disrupt another aspect of the existing gender roles in which girls work on the farm and also within the households, and they free them in order to attend this school in the metropolitan Sokoto so that they can achieve this future goal. I know I was moving very quick, and I just want to show you the timeline that I developed this research and execute the research and reporting the research. I want to just say a very quick thank you to Michigan State College of Education, because without them I wouldn't have done this research. The research really took extensive amount of resources and time because of the complex nature of the research and also the geography and the topic that I was exploring. And also the Center for Gender and Global Context also was very supportive. Of course, I cannot do this without the support of these amazing committee members, which fortunately are all women and mothers. So I received a very caring and professional support, and I cannot be more thankful than sharing this with you. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have roughly 10 minutes now for comments and questions, and thank you very, very much, Idris. And again, we need the mic not for amplification, but for recording. Okay, I saw Arturo, but I also saw Ghana's hand, so I don't know which one was first.
Congratulations, Abubakar, for your research.
Thank you.
I have a question. In general, obviously, that it will be needed more time to go deeper to certain aspects of your research. But it seems to me that I have a very specific question. This kind of education in the Quranic school is not recognized as by the secular education of government. I mean, for example, if you study there, this kind of education cannot be recognized for further studies in the government education system in Nigeria. It will be my first question. And in that sense, I have is more a curiosity. In the region of Sokoto, as we know, is historical famous because it's the how can I say, the cradle of very important Islamic reformist movements since the 19th century, 18th century. In that area, how they cope with extremist thinkings on idea that could affect the role of the education of this Quranic school. That will be me.
Do we want to take more questions, or we
why, I think because of the time,
yeah.
Why don't you quickly answer them when we go over, because we really do have to stop at 1:30.
Yeah, I think they are not considered to be school because there is no progression into the formal sector in terms of further studies and employment, as you said, which the formal government, I think, is the structure and the foundation is for you to be able to get a degree, for you to be recognized, for you to get a job. So they are not considered. And I think the government has been making some attempts to incorporate or integrate like formal curriculum into these centers, but I think we are yet to find a right, approach to do that. I think in terms of Sokoto and the importance of Sokoto and then how they are interliving with these schools, I think it's a very big question that is beyond the scope of this research, but I think there are other people, especially people who are engaged with, I will say, movements in terms of religious movements across the Sahel or the continent. I think they can answer this question better, but I will tell you from my experience, these people are just doing it out of need, and also the needs can be either material need or for them to retain their spiritual, I think, and cultural heritages.
I think that was a very brilliant presentation. Yeah, it was a very brilliant presentation. However, I was a little bit confused about the connection between your data analysis and theoretical framework. You said you use the feminist theory, yeah, and then the post-colonial theory. And so when you did your coding, there's nothing in that coding that suggests that your theories actually fed into the coding of your data. And that appears to me to be, yeah, a little bit discomforting. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about that. Then when you were talking about gender roles, I tried to embed it back in feminist theory. Yeah, it appears to me that there's also a kind of disconnect as well, or maybe possibly because you were trying to rush the presentation, you couldn't get into nuance, into the details of your understanding of the conservative gender role, how it fits into your theoretical framework of feminist theory, because feminist theory, there is a way that gender is enrolled into it. And given the understanding of what I understand of the findings of your dissertation, it appears that you couldn't get into details of that. Could you please speak a little bit into that?
So a quick answer is this is really a summary of this research, and I don't have the luxury to, and this is as much as I can do. And I use these theories to assess the roles of power and control. And when I say roles of power and control, feminist theory also is the perfect theory to look at the use of power and control. And also state agents in terms of, as I said, post-colonial actors and the native actors in terms of the policy making and implementation that is serving as some of barriers, for these people to have access to these educational institutions or contents within their own locales, and they have to go to cities like Sokoto. I think post-colonial theory, I think, is the right theory to look at. What are the legacies? What are the present governments doing? Why are they doing it? Are they repeating the same thing? Are they looking at different, angles, in order to address these issues? So I will be happy to talk more about you. And once this is published, I think you will be able to read it more.
It's more a comment rather than a question. So what I feel here is that we still are using the same traditional approach to understand gender roles in education. And I talk about that because now in agriculture sector, we are not looking at gender per se, but we are trying to understand masculinities and femininities in the agriculture system. And my concern is not the research per se, but is how we are going to influence decision maker. We still are looking at the girls as a very particular, unique group, and I think they are not. They are part of a community. So when you ask the question, learning how to support girls, I was asking, why not learning how to support boys to help the girls in the farm so the girls can have more time to go to the school? When you talk about how challenges societal norms, I say, which are these societal norms that makes the girls stay at the school? Like, what is written? And You didn't mention, but in Mozambique, we work with the Graça Machel Trust and the Foundation of Community Development in a program that it's called Girls Rise. And we found a lot of is early marriage. So a girl with 12 years old is already married. So the decision to attend the school is not a parent's decision, but the husband's decision. So lots of girls are left out of the school because it's not the parent anymore that is making the decision, but the husband. And there is this community in the border between Malawi and Mozambique where we found a woman that is the leader of the community. And when we showed to her that girls are getting trapped in the poverty because of early marriage, that leader decided that in her community, no girl below the age of 18 should be allowed to marry it. And all those men that they were trying to get married with girls, they start to see a different culture in that community that forbids them of getting girls. And we find this amazing because we had the political will at the community level to change these unchangeable societal norms. So I think we need to go deeper in trying to understand the life. Maybe the boys, they don't want to be at the school, they want to be at home cooking, and let the girls going to the school. So it's just more a comment on the way we analyze the data, and we need to start to understand also the masculinities in education, and how we can bring together girls and boys, and not having girls a very particular, unique, and special group. We are special, but in that case, it's our right to have access to education.
Thank you.
One very question.
I'm just curious, what happens when they finish the education, the girls and also boys?
That's an important question, and I think beyond the scope of the current study, while I was in the community, interacting with the community, I saw girls who finished from those schools, because that is my focus, for them to showcase to me how the school is meeting their needs, to say these are the girls that came back, and all the amazing things that in their own terms, the factors that they are taking into account to make their decisions are really successful. As I said, one of the traditional gender norms she point out to is marriage. And throughout my engagement with this data and the people, I never see any girl who is married at the age of 14, because many of the people that I have interviewed and I have seen, they are beyond 16 years. And they are telling me they will be getting married, but now is the time, because they have acquired these credentials for the suitors to start, indicating interest. So marriage, I think, is one of them, but beyond marriage, I cannot tell because I never explored that angle.
What about boys?
I never talked to the boys, because for the scope of this research is for these girls and it's for these girls. Maybe as a future area to explore, I will look at boys and girls.
Okay. This was wonderful. Wonderful to have our doctoral students from the continent, and it's very gratifying to see the types of research that they're doing and their contribution to Africa's future. So thank you very much. I want to reiterate what I said at the beginning. If you weren't here, there were...